I feel like diet culture sets you up to never be good enough.
Did you burn 500 calories on the treadmill today? No? Me either.
I mean, anybody can sit with us. We're just really not about diet culture.
But literally, happiness doesn't come from a low-calorie, high-intensity life. I actually do like carrots.
I do too. They're my favorite.
Welcome to the Fit Fueled Free podcast.
So basically, diets suck.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 61. I'm Danielle.
And I'm Jenna.
And today we are picking up with the fifth part of our 10-part mini-series on intuitive eating, this week focusing on discover the satisfaction factor. So I'll go ahead and dive in with the theme of this principle straight from the book. So the Japanese have the wisdom to promote pleasure as one of their goals of healthy living. In our fury to comply with diet culture, we often overlook one of the most basic gifts of existence, the pleasure and satisfaction that can be found in the eating experience. When you eat what you really want in an environment that is inviting, the pleasure you derive will be a powerful force in helping you feel satisfied and content.
I love that.
I know.
Because it's true, the environment plays such a huge role in the whole eating experience. But when you're in diet culture and restricting and either rushing through meals or whatever, you don't get to experience that piece of it. And I don't know. Yeah. I just remember being in the thick of diet culture and rushing through a meal and not being present. And now that I can be present, there's such a huge difference, and you don't really understand it, I feel until you're on the other side and can break away from that.
Yeah. And the thing that sticks out the most to me is how I used to be so strict for no reason, because there's nothing that me or my husband have to avoid eating. We don't have any allergies or intolerances, so other than taste preference, there's nothing that's off limits. And there was just I was so psychotic about it. I wouldn't let him have sugary, quote unquote, well, I don't know if I need to quote that or not, but you know what I mean,
yeah.
Cereal that tastes really, really good. I wouldn't let him have it because I was oh, this has more than X grams of sugar per serving. You can't eat this.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, I realized that I was sucking the life out of, it's not that we didn't have food that tasted good, but I was sucking the life out of it, of satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have such a balance in our pantry and in our refrigerator. And it's just so much more enjoyable to be able to have those foods. And so that was kind of the aha moment for me for satisfaction, was the only time we ate foods we really, really, really loved was when we ate out, because I literally didn't let them stay in the house. And that's so nonsensical.
Mm-hmm. I feel so many people can probably relate to that, because I feel that's such a thing in the diet culture world, is attaching the name cheat meal. Yeah. And you see this a lot on Instagram when people are going out to dinner with friends or spouses, girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever, and they're doing my cheat meal tonight. And it's always when they're at a restaurant, and it's just when you're not living your life under the rules of diet culture, cheat meals don't exist anymore, because you can have that balance. And if you want to have this quote unquote cheat meal, which you would only have at a restaurant, you can have it at home, but it's normal and it's not a cheat meal, and it just fits into your routine. And there's, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah. I ate a cinnamon bun. We've been buying those periodically because that's something we really enjoy.
Yeah.
And I had it with a Greek yogurt, and so it gave me the protein I needed to stay full for breakfast. I had it just with my coffee over the weekend, but we had leftovers, so I took it to work with me with the yogurt, and it just changed the entire experience. It wasn't this, oh, I'm eating this food that's labeled unhealthy and now it's gonna set the tone for this bad day. I was just oh, I have a carb and I have a protein source, perfect, let's go. So I think that's something, if you feel foods in your house aren't super enjoyable, especially when you're feeling like stressed out or like you want to emotionally eat and there's nothing around you that like sounds appealing, I feel like that's a good sign that you are being overly restrictive of what's in your household.
Yeah.
Understandably so, because we're taught that if it's around, that's all we're ever going to eat. But what we know about coming back to listening to your body and legalizing foods is that you can, like Jenna said, have them all in balance. So yeah. The first thing that they talked about in this chapter of ways that we make satisfaction impossible is if we eat Sawyer when we're famished, if our clothes are too tight, if we're like in a fight with someone, if we're not hungry, if we don't want that food, when we're counting calories or super worried about ingredients. And I think it's unlikely that one of those things aren't present just because of how pervasive diet culture is. Like that stuff's always on our minds. So it's interesting because if those are blocking you,
Yeah.
like how are you going to really enjoy the food? Like if
Yeah.
you're overly hungry, you're going to eat super quickly. If your clothes are too tight, like especially if you're sitting down for a meal and you can feel like that pressure, first of all, it's uncomfortable, but it's probably sending mental signals like that I shouldn't be eating this food because I'm fat and need to lose weight. Like just being frank, I feel like that's how most people talk to themselves. I've certainly talked to myself like that. If we're upset, like obviously that one is pretty clear. Like you're not gonna be able to enjoy something if you're feeling awful. If you're not hungry, you're also probably not going to enjoy it because it's not that you can't eat when you're not hungry, but that one also is probably pretty common sense. Like you're not going to get true enjoyment from it. If we don't want that food, again, if we're tricking ourselves into thinking we want to eat a salad when we want a cheeseburger, just use that example. It's not going to be satisfying. And then if you're thinking about the content of that food, then it's completely distracting you from the pleasure of it because you're focused on what you're going to have to do to compensate for your quote unquote mistake.
Yep. And I think of and give this example a lot before. I've probably given it on the podcast, but I think like the perfect example of this is like I'll give like a cookie, for example, or like something sweet. Like if that's truly like what you're craving, but you're looking to any and everything but the actual cookie to like satisfy that desire, typically you'll eat like multiple things to try and fulfill that, and sometimes end up like overeating to the point of being uncomfortably full because nothing is like fulfilling that craving. Whereas if you were to just let yourself have the one or however many cookies it is that you wanted, you could eat it and be done with it, and you wouldn't search for that satisfaction like through a million different things. Because if you're unsatisfied, you're likely going to be on the prowl and eat more regardless of your satiety level. And I think that's just something that's super important to recognize, and just shows how important it is to like honor your hunger. Because if you just had the one thing that you wanted, you could eat it, be satisfied, and done with it.
And what's really frustrating about that fact is that it gets used so often in diet culture to be like this trick for how to not gain weight. Because it's like, oh, if you just eat this one thing, you'll eat less overall, blah, blah, blah. So then people have this, that's where I think the moderation thing comes in, where it's like, if I really, really, really want something, but like, that's the thing about coming back to your body is you can't control that. Like you control your actions, but you can't control what you're wanting. And that's where the idea of like true balance is. There's going to be like a plethora of different things that you're consuming all the time. So if you tell yourself I'm only allowed to have this cookie once a week, like it's part of that cheat meal, then it's the same thing. Like you're still reinforcing diet culture. Basically, just pointing out instances where genuinely coming back to your body for the sake of healing and being able to honor yourself gets co-opted by diet culture. And it's actually just reinforcing fat phobia and the thin ideal. And that is something I want to make sure, like, I obviously can't control what you absorb when you hear us talking, but just making sure to clarify, because it gets super tricky, because that message can easily go one way or the other, but we are rooting it in coming back to your body. And I think the reason that we so often talk about it will help you not like overeat is because of the like what happens when we get in those cycles. Like then we're angry with ourselves and it becomes this like vicious cyclical thing you can't get out of. It's not that overeating is like this inherently bad thing, but it can become just such a strong force that really just disconnects you from everything, and actually can be harmful to your health rather than health promoting.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So something that I'm pretty sure they touched on this, but it just comes to my mind. And this is really important, I think, especially in the eating disorder world. But not every meal and snack you have is going to be perfectly satisfactory. So like if we focus on this idea of I'm only going to eat what's really satisfying to me, that is not really going to be fully possible, especially if you like plan some meals ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like it's not like you have to stick to your exact like grocery list. Like, yeah, there's going to be flexibility, but if you don't even know what is satisfying and you're always like going back and forth with it, first of all, you might not have a backup option in the moment. So like if you're not enjoying that food, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong by eating something that isn't like a 10 out of 10 satisfying for you, but it helps to come back to your body to try and increase satisfaction 100%. And we should move towards more opportunities for that, absolutely, because it makes a really big difference if you can enjoy food, but enjoying food can really bring up a lot for people, and it can take a long time to actually even allow yourself to really enjoy things, because it's that like false permission we talked about. Like you're saying that you love this thing, but if you haven't fully relented that guilt associated with it, are you actually like satisfied by it, or do you wish you had done something else?
Yeah.
Or are you gonna like start fresh the next day? So it's normal for guilt to be triggered if you have a pleasurable eating experience, if you've become really disconnected from your body and like a positive relationship with food. So I just want to touch on that, because I think that can be confusing if that is your experience and you're just like, oh, I'm supposed to like enjoy all these things. First of all, it's a practice. Second of all, not every single thing you eat is going to be perfectly satisfactory, but you still have to eat, because like that can really easily reinforce the idea too that calories are only like worth it, quote unquote, if you really love them. And I think that that's dangerous, like a slippery slope, because that can really easily reinforce like, oh, I can't waste calories if I don't love this food. But at the same time, that can be really intuitive, because if you had other options, like if you took a bite of something and you were like, oh, this isn't it for me, and you had a backup option, that's like an appropriate place to be like, okay, like I don't have to eat this just because. Like I used to have to complete something. Like I couldn't handle it if I tasted something and didn't like it. And then I was like, oh my God, like where do these calories go? Because they don't belong in this breakfast group. Like, and then I would try and like rationalize, like, okay, so like what if I had just eaten a little bit more at breakfast? Like that's where those calories would have gone. And it like became this like really intense mind game for me.
Wow.
Of trying to like figure out where it went. So just like throwing that out there, because I know that intuitive eating in a whole is meant more for just like healing relationship with food, but I think like the thing we don't ever know is where have the depths of your relationship with food gone to? Like, how disordered were we before like you're ready to do intuitive eating? And I think that really makes a difference for like how you're going to experience these things. And this particular part of being satisfied by food can be very, very, very difficult, and it can create like a bunch more food rules if we're not careful. So that's why I'm being like overly like playing devil's advocate with this particular rule.
No, I'm glad that you said that, because I feel like most people, I've said this before, who like end up going down like having an eating disorder or like being disordered with food or exercise, like they typically have the tendency to be very rigid and like rule followers. So if they hear us being like, oh, well, satisfaction, they're like, oh, well, I'm not satisfied. Like it creates a whole nother set of rules. And so then it creates rules under intuitive eating, which then isn't really intuitive eating at all. So I think it's really helpful that you touched on that, because it opens up, you know, the idea that like it's not going to look the same, and there's not these set of rules. Like there's such a huge range of feelings and experiences, and like it's not wrong if you're not always satisfied. So no, I think that's a really good point that you brought that up.
And that in and of itself, I think, is where intuitive eating can get so confusing, because if you think this is a set of rules, like when I'm never going to stop talking about this probably, but when Jillian Michaels was reading that list, she was reading this as like a set of rules.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's not the point. So that's why we're taking the time to like go through our experiences, like what we glean from this, like how we've done it ourselves. Like I have had a lot of experience obviously in doing this with helping other people heal their relationship with food. And so like that's the point, is because it's not as simple as just like reading this paragraph and following those rules at all.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So when they were talking about Japanese culture, I was curious, like, if they had kind of like we have the dietary guidelines for healthy Americans and like, you know, My Plate. I was wondering what Japan's like guidelines were. And I kid you not, on their like dietitian website, so like our Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics would be where like ours come from. So there's this Japanese health and nutrition information. It's the Japan Dietetic Association. Literally the first thing under dietary guidelines is enjoy your meals. And it says, have delicious and healthy meals that are good for your mind and body, achieve a longer, healthy life through your daily meals, and enjoy communication at the table with your family and other people, and participate in preparation of meals. And that like floored me.
Wow.
Because that really like genuinely is coming back to your body and like reinforcing how important that is for your well-being. And that shit is never listed unless it's mindfulness for the purpose of weight loss. Like that's the only time you see that, unless you're talking to like an anti-diet or a HAES aligned like healthcare professional. And that is just like really sad.
Yeah. Yep. That's crazy.
And it also really challenges the idea of what like we say like is health in America and like all that garbage, because people are people. So like if that's the number one thing that is beneficial to someone else's society, like doesn't that poke a hole in what we're telling people to do?
Yep. 100%.
So now I kind of want to like Google like a bunch of countries, like what are they telling their people? But just thought that was a good thing to point out, because that's not just like I know we think of like a lot of Asian culture being more like Zen, but like that's legit what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that makes me annoyed at America.
I wonder what like the percentage, I mean, not that any country is void of eating disorders, but I wonder if that plays into effect with like the percentage of eating disorders that people in other countries experiences, like versus the United States.
Yeah, so I think any established like first world country that has access to like Western like philosophies, like basically like American principles, like they're the ones that are more likely to have eating disorders.
Yeah.
So
Doesn't surprise me.
yeah. So I don't know what that's like in Japan, but that is a curiosity.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to talk about action items for this one?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Yeah, so I think you had written this down, but like coming back to like what do you really like to eat is going to be so important because so many of us become so detached from that when we are living under like the ramifications of diet culture because we're not eating what we enjoy anymore. We're no longer tuning into our body's cues and like what we're craving. We're simply going off of the diet culture rules or like the clean eating diet foods that are pushed on us, or like we're like subbing like the real version of something for like the lower calorie or lower sugar or lower fat, whatever. So we become so disconnected from our bodies and what we truly enjoy, and we ignore what we enjoy. So this might seem like a simple concept, but it's probably one of the most important, but like also one of the most difficult because you have to like relearn how to eat almost like without bias.
Yeah.
It's gonna be super hard.
And so like coming back to your five senses around food, it can be very, very difficult because it does require you to come back to your body. And at the same time, it does give like a tangible fact. So it's not about you necessarily in the food. It's just like, well, it is because your experience is different, but like, forget about that. It's like, what do you factually, like, what is the taste for you?
Yeah.
Is it pleasant? Like, what do you get from it? And then that's that. Like, that's the food rather than it being like convoluted in all these like food roles. And then like texture, like what kind of texture do you like? Do you like smooth and creamy? Are you more someone that wants more crunch to their food? That's going to determine how you prepare things and what kind of stuff you're going for more often. Like what's that mouth feel that you're getting from it? What's the smell? The aroma is a nicer word for food, but that can really draw us in. And if something smells better, especially if you're like having a hard time knowing like when you should eat, like that can like activate hunger. Like positive aromas of food, and everyone's going to have different preferences for that. So like what kind of smells do you like with food? Visual is important. Or like if you just plate things a little bit like with thought, sometimes that can even change how you feel about that particular food, because we are visual creatures. Like all of our senses matter in that regard. And so that's why like restaurants and TV companies, like fast food companies, like they advertise that, because that visual, that's what we're getting, and it entices us to want to eat the food because it looks good. And so that definitely makes a difference in just coming back to like, what do you like to see in your food? And then the temperature of it, like, do you want something cold? Do you want something hot? Do you, and I guess even like spiciness would go into that as well. Like what are you interested in with that? And that probably varies like with the temperature outside, or it could for some people. And then this isn't necessarily like one of the five senses, but like what is the like volume or filling capacity of the food? So like, is it something light? Like if you know you're not feeling particularly well, we don't typically want to go for something very heavy. Like I'm thinking like fettuccine alfredo and like a piece of garlic bread would be like a pretty heavy meal, and sometimes that's like perfect. Other times that's not going to be like what's up for what you need. And so just thinking of like what you actually like in that regard, and if you can like put all of those together, like it requires more thought but it's bringing you back to like what your interests are and just making it more like factual and tangible rather than just like this complete chaos. So it's like a good practice.
Yeah, I think also this is not with the five senses anymore, but something else that you can do is simply like take a few breaths before eating, because that like calms your body down, it calms like your central nervous system down, and it lets your body know that like you're getting ready to eat. Like especially if there's food around, like it just puts you in like that parasympathetic state where your body is like starting to relax, and like it'll just help you to be present with the meal so that you are able to tune in and engage with like that experience. And I think something important as well with like the environment is if like you are trying to reestablish all of these like connections with your body and how you're feeling, like kind of remove all the distractions. So don't watch TV while you're eating, like, or be on the computer if you can help it. I know sometimes like you're at work and you're busy and you like have to, you know, eat on the go, but if you can even take just like 10 to 15 minutes to like try and ground yourself and be present and like not be frantically doing something, that can be super helpful. Because sometimes like if you're so busy or you're watching TV, you'll just mindlessly eat, and the next thing you know, like your food is gone and you didn't even taste it and you don't even know how you're feeling. And so I think that can be another really important piece of just kind of reestablishing all of the like the satisfaction and like figuring out how does this food taste, how does it feel, and like what your reaction and response to it is.
So they give this like easy way to remember that for implementing mindfulness as the 3 S's. So eat slowly, eat sensually, and savor each bite, which can be like a good reminder to again, it's practice. This isn't a food rule. No one's shaming you for not eating in front of a TV. That's diet culture BS. But it's legitimately, you can't practice mindfulness if you're watching TV. I will say like a caveat to that is if you're like someone who's super, super anxious around eating, like you have an eating disorder and that idea is just terrifying you, or like you've done work, you're not engaging in behaviors, but thinking about food is overwhelming because like it's bringing you back to your body, and that can be very difficult for some people because of the trauma that eating disorders and dieting and whatever else you've been through can cause. So sometimes it is mindful to distract yourself so that you can eat, but that's like that's not exactly what we're talking about. But just again, like there's almost always going to be some kind of like way you can play devil's advocate with all of these things. And, that's good because again, it's about your individual experience, because not everyone's going to be intuitive in the same way. If that was happening, that's a rule.
Right.
So again, this is going to be something that comes out of my mouth like every time I'm on this podcast. You have to eat regularly so that you avoid getting to the point of no return hunger wise in order to like really enjoy something. That's always going to be good advice. Create that pleasant experience. So like if you're going to be mindful, if you can have a positive environment, and I'm going to talk a little bit more of that I think in the next episode. Don't finish something if you don't have to, but I already touched on why that can be very slippery slope. So check in with yourself on if that's honest or if that's coming from a place of diet culture. And if you don't know, I would recommend journaling on that one or asking a trusted professional or friend who is, by trusted, I mean is like a safe, non-diety person to ask that one. And then I also think it's important to mix up your recipes and have a wide variety of options available. That's like part of why we've expanded the different things that we allow in our house. Well, really, that had nothing to do with Matt because he's never had rules like that himself. But why I did is because you can't be satisfied if you're only like eating chicken and sweet potatoes every day. Like you need variety. Something else that I am still like wondering about this one, because I don't know if I've experienced this, but that food, a lot of people experience that food stops tasting as good as you are nearing fullness.
I was just gonna bring that up, so I'm glad you did.
Does that happen to you?
No.
I don't think I've ever experienced it, but I wonder if like there's just like, again, like everyone's experience is going to be different. So like something is telling me that I'm done eating. Like where I used to pound a pint of Ben and Jerry's and then hate myself, now I can literally stop eating ice cream at any point, not bragging, but like just highlighting healed relationship with food. It's nice not to have to punish yourself by eating a pint of ice cream when you don't want it. Something is telling me I'm done. And maybe it is because I'm like, I've had enough of this. Like, I don't need more of this taste. So like, maybe that's it. That's the only thing I could think of. But like, macaroni and cheese has been my favorite food for my entire life. And unless it's like a crap recipe, it tastes as good the whole time I'm eating it forever and ever.
No, I agree with you on that. I don't experience it like that. My internal cue is not ever, oh, this doesn't taste as good. It may be a sign that I'm not hungry anymore. But like you said, it could be in like a different way. Like I don't know. Like when I just feel like once you do all this work, like when I'm like full, like you just know. And that sounds like ludicrous to say. I feel like unless you really have done the work, but like, I just know. So maybe that goes hand in hand with the not tasting as good, but truly, I don't really feel like I ever take a bite of something that tasted good 10 minutes ago. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't taste as good anymore. Like I'm done. Like that's just not my experience, but I think you're right. It could be some people's experiences for sure. I just don't know what that's like because food always tastes good.
Me either. If anyone who's listening has this experience, can you please like DM us or write an email to us? Because I really want to hear like more about this because I find that very interesting.
Yeah.
What else do I have? Oh, so there also like are studies that have shown that artificial sweeteners can increase your desire for sweets because they're sweeter than like natural sugars. And so especially if like you're eating diety foods and you're a distracted eater, it can really like increase your desire for more because of the fact that you've completely like missed the mark on satisfaction there for a lot of reasons. So like I'm not telling anyone they can't have artificial sweeteners. Like I actually love the taste of Diet Coke over regular Coke. Like I don't know why I like aspartame, but I think it's delicious. And I will drink Diet Coke from time to time. And I kid you not, I freaking love it. Like it is so good to me. I know there's a lot of Diet Coke fans out there, so I'm not the only one, but like just something to think about if we're not consuming sugar for like fear of the sugar, it can kind of backfire on you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I have. I'll let you finish up on your tips.
Yeah, I just think Nala was itching herself. I think it's just really important. We say this all the time, but like this is never going to be a perfect process. And like that intuitive eating is not a process that seeks perfection. And so if you feel like as you're trying to embark on this intuitive eating journey that like you are feeling pressure of perfection, that is not coming from intuitive eating. That's probably still coming from like deeper rooted diet culture messages that you're still living under or listening to. Because intuitive eating truly like it just offers guidelines for you to have like a more comfortable relationship with food. And like Danielle said earlier, like it's not always going to be possible, and you may not like always be in an environment where like you can always have exactly what you want, and sometimes you may not know what you want, but like that's okay. Like this is a process, like it's a journey. We say this all the time, it's not linear. So to just like give yourself grace, we say that as well, and like remove that pressure to like be perfect in this, because that's just going to continue to like bog you down and push you down in this process if you're expecting to have like if you're expecting perfection at any point in your journey with this.
And it's freaking terrifying to not have rules. Like when you get used to rules, especially if you have had an eating disorder or you still have one, or if you have like likely co-occurring mental health diagnoses, which is very common with heavily disordered eating. that perfectionism and that rule following may be coming from something that actually has nothing to do with food. We just like to use food to make ourselves feel better, and in turn it always makes ourselves feel like worse when we're using it for that purpose.
Yeah. Yep.
So it sucks. Like, I wish I had rules that I could give you for like your peace of mind.
Yeah.
But it just literally does not. It won't work.
Yeah.
Food rules will not work.
Nope.
So yeah, I think that's about that for satisfaction.
Yep.
So thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, if you have any commentary on food tasting not as good as you get full, please shout out. But we always love to hear from you guys, so send us a DM, send us an email if there's anything you want to share, if there's anything you want to hear from us. If you want to keep up with what we've got going on, you can follow us on Instagram at FitFueledFree, and then our personal pages. Mine is Dietitian Dani Cast, and Jenna's is Jen Ep Fit, and we always appreciate ratings and reviews. And yeah, that's about it. So thanks again, guys, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, guys.